This is good. All right, we're recording now. We missed just my very intro, so that's good. Thank you, Michael. Yada yada, I'm Ben. The presentation's being recorded. The information will be sent out in slides if you want them later. Let's go. So, what is Noodlecake? Noodlecake is the name of the company that I work for. And we both develop some of our own games in-house as well as act as a publisher to help other people release their games. And if you ever come to the Saskatoon Game Dev meetups, we've been hosting them at our office recently, so come say hi. Noodlecake was founded back in 2011, so we've managed to survive and thrive for a long time by indie game studio standards. When the company started, it was very much focused on the mobile game market. That's what I'm talking to you about today, and was bootstrapped by the success of the Super Stickman Golf series of games. But as we've grown the company, we've also gotten into the PC and console space. And in fact, our game Winterboro that came out last November on PC and console has been our most successful launch to date. So we've been growing. So Michael almost definitely has more Steam knowledge than me, but I do know a fair bit about the video game market as a whole as well. And yeah, we have launched a lot of games at this point. Back in the early days of the company, we definitely launched games more frequently. They were smaller scale mobile games. Yeah.
It looks like on Discord, I did notice it's not showing the slides on Discord.
It's not showing the slides? This was working when I tried earlier.
All right, thanks for pointing that out, Ethan. Luckily, we haven't.
It's
only
showing
missed, like,
in here.
Slide.
I can't see the Discord thing when I'm doing it.
Yeah. This is what it's showing right now.
Oh, it's still showing me though.
Yeah,
when I did a recording earlier, this worked. I wonder.
Is it streaming the wrong screen? Or desktop? Or maybe just the app?
I mean, maybe it decided to make a different display. Let's see.
Streaming Discord and recording is tough.
Very
problems.
Annoying. Okay, we'll try one other thing here. Sorry, everybody. I tested this with a second monitor earlier today, and it was working great. Mac OS screen capture. We'll do that. Give me display. Should be this guy here.
Yeah, looks right.
And when I play it, it shows up there.
Okay, that looks.
Oh, it is showing up on the Discord now. Okay.
Looks good.
We lost my face, but maybe I can shove that in there real quick. How do I bring that forward? Oh, does that do it? Hey, I think that's gonna do it. Here's hoping. I see me in the screen.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, are we good, everybody? We're good? Sorry for the technical difficulties. But yeah, okay. Here we go. 2011 have grown into PC console. And yeah, we've launched a lot of games at this point. Back...
recording?
I don't think I stopped the recording, so I'll double check. Right, no. We're still recording. We're still recording. Okay. Hopefully we're good now. Okay. Yeah, so we launched a lot of games at this point. Back in the early days, we definitely launched games a lot more frequently, smaller scale, kind of mobile games in particular. But we have seen a lot of successes and a lot of failures as well, which has really helped us key into what can be done to give games the best chance of success that we can give them. And we've been definitely focusing more on quality over quantity at this point. I haven't actually figured out how many games we've launched. That 150 number is pulled from a presentation I did several years ago, and even then I'm pretty sure it was wrong. We might be over 200 at this point. It's just kind of hard to find that out now because it's a bunch of them aren't on the stores anymore and stuff. Yeah.
Do you know how many you've developed in-house?
In-house, it's closer to the 10 mark.
Sure. Okay.
Around there. So a lot of them have been published titles, especially early on. We started by doing a lot of iOS to Android ports because the game engines didn't just export to it. A lot of games were made specifically for iOS. And so early on, a lot of big games that were early in the mobile days, we did the Android versions of them. And so here's a small selection of the games we have developed or published. And I've personally worked on almost all of these, I think, to varying degrees, along with a ton more. I should also note that we didn't publish all of these titles on all platforms. Some of them we only did like the mobile version, for example. But it just goes to show you that we are a trusted partner among a lot of indies out there. And hopefully you maybe recognize an icon or two. Now, who am I? And we'll get to the meat right away, I promise. My name's Ben. I've been the head of technology at Noodlecake, which is just a fancy way of saying I'm the main technical lead for the company. I've been at Noodlecake for over 12 years now and have had a key role in the development and launch of a ton of our games, lots of published ones and a few first-party ones as well. And I've had a lot of other minor roles involving managing and technical help and porting games and all sorts of stuff. I've personally worked on, honestly, so many games that I've lost count of how many at this point. In my current position, I'm leading the development of a game called Super Flappy Golf, which you can go download right now on iOS and Android, in addition to working on a bit on a game of ours called Golf Blitz, making sure that every thing keeps running smoothly from a technical perspective, and for the rest of our developers is something I'm doing as well. And we're starting to think about some new game ideas to prototype. In terms of my publishing chops, I also used to see every game pitch that came in, and I'm still one of the people responsible for helping decide what games we decide to pick up as published titles. And I have pretty good knowledge of what needs to be done in order to ship successful games and what kind of things you should be incorporating into your games for the best chance of that success. And I also own way too many CRT televisions, and I'm going to be getting rid of a bunch of them this summer. So if anyone wants one for their retro game setup, come talk to me after in the chat. All right, with the credentials out of the way, I'm just going to give you a quick idea of the topics we're going to get into today, and then we'll dive in. So, oh, nice. I forgot that I did that. That's sweet. So first up, some info about the different storefronts and the market. And then we'll talk about business models and monetization. We'll get into analytics, then marketing and discoverability. And last but not least, but maybe most fun, player behavior and best practices. And by the time we get there, you'll honestly probably be tired of hearing me talk, but I'll open to the floor to questions at that point. And again, you can interrupt me for questions throughout if you'd like. Let's do it. So starting up, storefronts and market. And to kick this topic off, let me start by sharing some stats and business analysis about the market itself. And note that I'm going to be throwing a lot of numbers at you, but again, you don't need to remember these. I'm mostly sharing them to give you some context of stuff we'll be talking about later in the presentation, and frankly, because I kind of think they're interesting. So let's do it. First stat I'm going to share is that the mobile game market is bigger than the PC and console market combined. Pretty much however you look at it. According to Newzoo, in 2025, 55% of game spending was on mobile games, and that's just direct spending from players. It doesn't even take into account ad revenue and revenue from other sources. And if we bring ads into the picture, then mobile size of the pie grows even further. Do note that this chart I have on this slide, it's a bit wishy-washy. It's combining data from a few different sources, and there's some estimation going on, but there's no doubt that ads are way more prevalent on mobile, and that will increase that size of the pie even more. Mobile also just has a lot more players. 83% of people who play games play mobile games. So note that the numbers in this slide, they don't add up to 100%. That's because some people will play mobile games and other games. But out of all people who play games, 83% play mobile games. So there's a ton of players on mobile. And so since there are more players, it might not surprise you to see that it accounts for way more game downloads than PC and console. But really seeing this in a graph really helps put it in perspective. Do we have laser pointer? Well, laser pointer doesn't work too good on the TV. But like this is PC and console, and this is all of the mobile game downloads. It's pretty stark. And if you look at this graph that was shared recently in a Game Discover Co's newsletter, you can see that the number of devices out there to play mobile games just dwarfs PC and mobile as well. Way more people have phones than have PCs and consoles, and usually if you have a PC or console, you also have a phone. So it follows that typically there's just more people who could play your games, frankly. And this actually has a little bit of a projection as well. I just kind of find it interesting. All the markets are mostly growing a little bit, so that doesn't mean that PC and console is dead by any means, but mobile is just growing faster in terms of devices, and we've actually there's more devices in the world than there are people at this point, which I found pretty interesting, actually. And so another thing worth noting is that the majority of mobile game players are not from North America. Only 9% of mobile game downloads come from North America, and Asia has a huge share. This is actually more or less true of PC console as well, but the thing is that despite it having a smaller share of downloads, an oversized portion of the revenue does come from North America. The quote above says Western countries, which does a fair bit of lifting, as that also includes Western European countries and Australia and New Zealand. And it's just really hard to get stats that have everything that you need here. But in particular, it says the US alone commands 45% of iOS spend. So despite them having a way smaller number of downloads, US is the biggest market out there for mobile. And I can confirm this, at least with our revenue numbers at Noodlecake. The majority of our money definitely comes from the US. Maybe or maybe not surprising, mobile gamers do skew older compared to PC and console. So all of the moms playing Candy Crush do affect those numbers. But that said, because there are so many mobile gamers out there, there is still a bigger market for younger gamers on mobile than there is on PC and console. And despite the market getting bigger, there's also, frankly, a lot more competition on mobile, though. So in 2025, there were 150,000 games released on Google Play and 55,000 games released on iOS, compared to around 20,000 released on Steam. So with well over 500 games being released every day on mobile, I think it's like 560 if you do the math on this slide and take out the Steam side. It's just really hard to stand out. And to make things even harder, your strongest competition isn't even the games that are releasing around the same time as you. If you look at this chart from App Figures, this looks at 2024 data. You can see that only around 6% of the market revenue went to games that were released in 2024. So 94% of the revenue went to games that were older, that came out in previous years. And titles as far back as 2015 are making a higher percentage of revenue than brand new games. Some old live ops games remain king after even 10 years. And, to make matters worse, both Apple and Google now rely heavily on algorithms designed to maximize revenue to decide what games to recommend to people and what is most prominently showcased in their stores, instead of using more editorial control or highlighting new titles more. And so the games that are already making the most money tend to be the biggest and most visible on the storefronts, clouding out new contenders.
Ben?
Yep.
Do you know what some of those games are, like those big ones that get most of the money? Do you know of any of them?
I mean, if it's like the Clash of Clans
Okay.
and Clash Royale, like Supercell games are huge.
Yeah.
King Games, Candy Crush, right?
Yeah.
There's newer ones, Honor Among Kings. Monopoly Go is the biggest new hit,
Yeah.
and it's making the most money by far. Well, it's making the most money now, and that one actually is a newer game.
Yeah.
But I mean, we can talk about that a bit more too. They redid the game 3 times before they released it. It took them it was a 5-year development cycle or something. They have over 150 people now. They spend millions and millions of dollars on advertising. It's a crazy world, and we're going to keep diving into it.
Yeah.
So that said, if you can get those storefronts have these algorithms that really help promote the games that are making them money, frankly, and I will talk a little bit more about that later. But that said, if you can get into the good graces of those algorithms, your game can continue to make money for years and years without actually adding a bunch of marketing money to it and that kind of thing. If it starts recommending your game, you're in a pretty good spot. So it's also really, really hard to launch a paid game on mobile. While more players than you think, are willing to spend money on mobile games, it's pretty much expected that games are free up front. There's some nuance, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And there's still some hope for premium experiences. The storefronts are really pushing right now to try to get people willing to pay for games. But the fact of the matter is that even a $1 game will find it has a tough time finding an audience now, which is especially hard considering, most Steam players won't bat an eye at spending $5 on a game. That's a deal, right? On mobile, $1, no way. That's the most expensive thing I've ever seen. You kidding me? Absolutely not. That said, we do have some premium games, and they do make money. So you can still make money. It's just harder, and your reach is smaller, especially compared to the size of the market. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the storefronts themselves. On PC, pretty much, Steam pretty much has a monopoly on PC with around 75% of the PC distribution market. But that said, it's really open in the sense that device makers don't lock you into using Steam, and it has a much lighter hand when moderating how games work and what content they can have in them and how that kind of stuff. They even allow you to generate Steam keys and sell them outside of their storefront. This is not something that they allow on mobile. By contrast, Apple and Google are essentially a duopoly, and working with them is a requirement to reach most of the mobile market outside of China. They have review processes that are fairly strict about how your application operates and the content that can be in it, and they regularly impose changes and updates to your games in order to keep them on the store, especially Google Play, which often will hit us at Noodlecake with a giant slew of emails saying we have to update every one of our games. And it really, really sucks as people who have a big catalog of games. They require that new devices new games are targeting the latest Android SDK in particular. If you don't update your game every 2 years, then new devices just won't see your game when they search for it. That means you can't just release a game and expect it to live on the store forever. You have to be ready to update your games every couple of years at a minimum, even if you're not adding new content to them. All that said, I should add a few caveats that in China, the market is predominantly Android focused, but almost no one uses the Google Play Store. The market is super fractured with tons and tons of different smaller app stores, but that are also really, really big because there's lots of people in China. Additionally, in a lot of Asian countries, there are stores run by a lot of the telco operators, which will, they'll have their own stores pre-installed on the Android phones they sell and that kind of thing. And while none of them hold a big portion of the global market, it is still technically possible for some of those storefronts to be pretty lucrative for developers. And one more stat slide, and then I swear I'll stop throwing numbers at you for just a little bit. Google Play gets way more downloads than the App Store, but the App Store accounts for 64% of the revenue. So despite it having a much smaller number of downloads, there's a lot more money to be made on iOS, which is why you might see a lot of iOS apps releasing features there first and then bringing them to Android, or it just sometimes gets a little bit more love. And I do want to stress that, they also, advertising also makes less money per user on Android, which basically means that Android users are worth less than iOS users. But that's from a purely price per user perspective for all the Android users out there. We love you too. Okay, now let's talk about platform revenue cuts. So first off, I should note that these only apply to in-app purchases and paid apps themselves, because in-app advertising revenue comes from ad providers, and they take whatever cut. You don't really know how much they're taking, but they pay you directly, and Apple and Google don't really have anything to do with that. So first up, Google Play. They have a pretty to easy understand structure for their stuff. They'll take 15% of your first $1 million USD per year. And then once you pass that threshold, they'll take 30% for the rest of the year. This is kind of the opposite of Steam, which will charge you 30% for almost all games, but then will sometimes give games better rates once they become really successful. And because the app stores want to incentivize recurring revenue, they actually take 15% for subscriptions, regardless of the amount of revenue you've made that year. So if you're annoyed by all of the subscriptions that your apps are trying to throw on you, that's why, because they will make more money if it's a subscription instead of an in-app purchase. Apple's structure is a little bit more annoying, but similar. They will take a 30% cut on the first year that you make your developer account. And then in subsequent years, if your company has made less than $1 million US, then they'll take a 15% cut of your first million and then take 30% after that. Basically, it turns into the Google Play structure. Okay. But if you made $1 million, then you're always at 30%. And then, yeah, Michael?
Could you just create an Apple account and let it sit there for a year, or is this per app?
You could do that. However, it's associated accounts count. So if they're all going to your company, then you can't get around it that way. Mm. But if it's your first time launching an app, yes, you could make your developer account now, let it wait until January, and then launch your first game.
Would that not start once you release your first app?
I think it's when you make your developer account, actually. Maybe I'd have to look into it, but I believe it's actually when you first make your developer account. The idea being that you couldn't have some big name game just making a new company, making a new game, and getting a lower revenue share for the first bit. They're trying to get rid of loopholes, but it just kind of makes it really annoying for everybody. In a similar vein, their subscriptions are also kind of annoying. They will charge you the same cut that they'll take for your in-app purchases until that user has subscribed for a full year. And if they've subscribed for a full year, then it's 15%. So the longer you can keep people subscribed to something, the more money you'll make, basically. One thing to call out about these fee structures is it actually can really hurt companies that have a lot of apps, like Noodlecake, for example. I don't believe any of our games make over $1 million a year on a given platform anyway. But because our accounts have such a big number of games, we're pretty much always going to hit that $1 million mark. And so the Apple one in particular, we never get to see that 15% cut. And that is kind of something to keep in mind when if you're looking to work with a publisher, because you're never going to get that initial lower store cut, more or less, unless the publisher isn't as well known. That said, I would say at Noodlecake, we earn back that cut with our market knowledge and connections and technical help and all the other stuff we offer. But it is something to consider if you are looking to publish your first game. And last up, I need to talk a little bit about payment providers other than Apple and Google, because these have become a bigger and bigger part of the discourse in mobile games, especially among the really big players who can throw their weight around a little bit more. Across the world, laws are starting to come down, forcing these companies to allow for other payment providers essentially bypassing their cut. In theory, this allows you to get a much better cut of the revenue, as most of those providers only charge 10% or less even. Plus, if you're using Apple and Google's payment systems, any revenue going through those doesn't count towards your yearly revenue numbers, right? If you have both and some of your money is going through the external processor, that's not going towards your $1 million a year. That said, depending on the country, the storefronts have found ways to severely hinder the upside of using these by charging you commissions, for example, that you have to pay even if you didn't use their payment processor. And in certain countries where the laws weren't written strongly enough, I guess, they don't let you use both their payment systems and the other payment systems in your app. You can only have one or the other, which means all of those players that already have their credit card in Apple and Google and would be willing to pay you that way have to go through the extra friction of maybe setting up an account or entering credit card details or something, and that can hurt your overall revenue numbers. The other thing is, even if you're only using these payment processors in one app, it often the side effects that the companies impose affect your whole catalog of games. So, for example, we know Devolver was about to use one of these, and we told them, that affects your entire account, right? And they were like, no. And they canceled the deal because it would have completely screwed them over. So something to keep in mind. Other payment providers, I guess, here we go. EU, US, South Korea, and Japan are the main places that you can do this, which is a big segment of the market, especially the most profitable markets. And the payment processors themselves typically take between 5 and 10%. Some of them take lower, but then you end up dealing with chargebacks and everything. It usually ends up kind of netting out to around 5. But yes, beware of the repercussions. Michael.
So yeah, just to reiterate, Google and Apple don't actually make any money unless you use their payment processors.
Correct.
Okay, that's very strange. Yeah, so Steam always takes its cut, but it allows credit cards and all that stuff as well. So I guess is it the same or different? Yeah.
Yeah, so if you generate Steam keys and sell them outside,
Yeah,
Steam still takes their cut?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, they don't. Yeah.
Yeah.
They don't take a cut if you do that.
So this is the thing. They basically have been able to set their program policies being like, okay, if you use these other companies, we're still going to take a cut in some way or another. There's a few different ways they do it, and it's extremely annoying no matter how you slice it. Some of them, I think there was a platform fee that they were trying to do where it was you pay 5% of every transaction, which still would mean better, but then there was other ones that were you could end up paying up to 20% anyway, even though you were using this other company. And there was they were throwing around a per download fee at some point too, because they're well, we're providing the infrastructure that everybody's downloading the game from. So if you take our cutout, then we're not getting paid. And it's honestly, it's a little bit predatory, but it's Steam takes 30% too. So I don't know. We'll see how it shakes out in the coming years. Okay, so that was section number 1. Let's stop talking quite so much about numbers and policy. And we'll talk a bit more about how to make your mobile game make money. So the first thing to talk about is if you should list your game as free-to-play or premium. As you might remember from one of the earlier slides, around 96% of mobile game downloads are for free-to-play games. So right off the bat, you just can't ignore that if you have an upfront price for your game, you're going to severely limit your game's potential reach. Back in the day, when I started, mobile gamers were often willing to pay, $1 or $2 for a great ad-free experience, but that's harder than ever now. People just don't want to even click on your game and see what it is if it has a price tag attached to it. So, that doesn't mean it's impossible. Noodlecake, like I said, does have a bunch of apps that are making money. It's just much harder to find a big market, and it ends up being kind of more reliant on sales, kind of like Steam, and third-party websites listing your great deals of the day. And it really helps if the game already has a following, maybe from like Steam or console, honestly. So yeah, you really ideally want to give players, players expect to have a taste of your game before they start spending money, but you know, some people do spend money. So with that in mind, let's talk about the different ways to make money as a free-to-play game. Whenever you make a game for mobile or adapt a PC console game to mobile, you should think through the different possible monetization models and try to pick the one that you think will work best for your game. So first up, and least fun of all of them, is advertising. The thing about ads is they don't make very much money for an individual user, but if your game is free and you get lots and lots of people playing, then the numbers can add up to really healthy revenue. The one downside to consider, though, is that other than the fact that your game just now has ads in it, which kind of sucks, ads are almost always going to be advertising other games. And you will actually get paid a lot more for your ads if players decide to go download the game that's being advertised. So weirdly, you're kind of incentivized to convince other players to go play a different game, which feels bad. That said, there are 3 main types of ads that you can display in your game. Banners, interstitials, and rewarded. Banners are exactly what you'd expect. They're just like banner ads on websites. They take over part of the screen while the player is either like playing or in menus. Maybe they're on like the results screen or something in your game. But they don't stop interaction with the game itself. These ads can do honestly better than you'd expect. But they really make your game look ugly, and they're likely to scare away a lot of players pretty quickly if they're too intrusive. You also actually have to be careful not to put them somewhere that players are going to accidentally click regularly, because if your game has too high of a percentage of click-through rates on the banner ads, like abnormally high, the ad companies will review your game for fraudulent behavior. So if you have it too close to some of your buttons and people are accidentally clicking it, they might tell you, no, clearly no one meant to click on that ad, we're not paying you. Next up is interstitials. These are forced ad views that in theory are supposed to be able to be skipped after like 5 to 15 seconds. But the ad companies have gotten super duper aggressive in the last 5 years, maybe a little bit more. And multi-stage ads are really like the norm now, and it's honestly, it takes a lot of users like 30 seconds to a minute to get out of them, which is quite an interruption when it's a forced ad that you're giving someone. Back when I started in the industry, these types of ads could be immediately dismissed. Usually they were even just a picture, and you could close them. And then when they started videos, it was a 5-second video that you could close it after 5 seconds. Usually the video was 30 seconds, but you could get out of it after 5 seconds. Now they really try to lock people into those ads. So you have, with that in mind, you have to use them like really sparingly. Otherwise, players will get frustrated and just leave your game instead of waiting for the ad.
Yeah, do you find that play times retention rates are actually like lower since that became more common with your experience, or?
It's in the games that we haven't changed to like adapt for new ad logic. Yeah, yeah, like they definitely do lower retention. Now the weird part is there is certain like playable ads. Sometimes kids actually really like them. And certain people like playing them. They feel like a mini game sometimes, which is the weird side effect of like, well, like think about, you might have commercials you saw when you were a kid that you're nostalgic about.
That's true.
Certain kids will actually like some of the ads that pop up, and it doesn't like upset them. But when you're really trying to focus on the game, and especially if it's forced on you at a time that you didn't expect, it's pretty jarring, and it just sucks. like if you're not really committed to what's about to happen in the game, you might just close the app and never come back. Yep.
I guess this is kind of random. I guess what if the user's like an interstitial ad pops up? Can the user like just like minimize the game and go do something else and come back? Like how does the app handle
No,
that?
it's like part of the app life cycle. So if you minimize the app, when you come back, the timer will be at the
Just
same
back.
spot. It'll be at the same spot. Yeah.
I think you can close the app when it goes away, but then you have to restart what you're doing, right? So,
Exactly.
Hmm.
You can close the app, then you have to re-log in. Depending on where you are, you might lose progress. It's kind of a bad experience, no matter how you look at it. Because people are here for the fun, not the ads. But unless, of course, we're talking about rewarded ads, then they are here for the ads. So rewarded ads are basically the same thing as interstitial ads, except that the player has to purposefully decide to watch the ad in exchange for a reward of some kind. So players get a reward for watching the ad and can decide just not to view them if they don't want to see them. They just are much better received than most banners and interstitials, and they won't tend to get you so many bad reviews. They also make the most money, which is nice. You can use these to give people extra currency, an extra life when they die, rerolls on items, or really anything that you can think that the player might want in your game. With both interstitials and banner ads, though, you'll need to find a good time to display them that won't hurt gameplay too much, as they do take up the whole screen and all of the user's attention. So you still need to think of a good place to give them that reward, but yeah. Okay, one other thing I should briefly talk about is mediation networks. So most mobile games will actually have a bunch of different ad networks in their games in an attempt to get the highest paying ads across a bunch of different ad networks. Because that will maximize revenue. What a mediation network does is you hook all of your ad networks into that one system, and then it decides what ads to display in your game. And previously there was different algorithms that they all had, but most of them now follow some sort of a bidding system where they'll actually reach out to all the different ad networks in your game, and they'll bid on the user on how much they want to spend to show that user an ad. And it is very much per user. It's not per game. They have more data than is comfortable. And they know which players, for example, spend money in games, and so they'll bid more to show ads to those players. If you only have one ad network in your game, chances are that companies just aren't going to give you very high bids because there's no competition. So it's a very good idea to have a mediation network in your game, and a lot of them are run by are run by ad networks. So AppLovin has one, Unity Ads has one called Level Play, Google has one. They're not necessarily a totally separate product. And so if you are just starting out and you have a small player base, it's probably okay to just have one ad network in your game. You'll still get some money out of it. It's not going to be like drastically, like you're not going to get nothing. And it's a lot less administrative work than setting up like accounts and billing with 10 different ad networks. So if you're testing your game out, by all means, just like try with one and then maybe decide to add more ad networks in and set up a mediation layer once your game has got some success. Michael?
These mediation networks also charge some fee?
They do not, but they almost all have their own ad network, which they basically require you to be in the mediation stack.
Okay.
So if you're using them, then you're also going to be using that company's ad network, and it's going to be bidding on stuff. And usually they'll have the most data on everything. So.
How do they get, so like what sort of data are you feeding to these ad networks so they know who they're displaying ads to?
So we don't feed any data directly to ad networks.
Okay.
The SDKs will track as much as they can, though, within legal grounds, and we have cases where we will also tell them, like, this is a minor, you can't track this person. But basically there are systems set up so that if they click an ad, that can be attributed to where it came from, and it can send it back to you. And then a lot of times those same providers, they'll hook into like maybe your payment system, and they'll see this user spent money on this game, and now they're playing this game. And they won't have necessarily your very personal details, but they'll have a lot about how you play games. The exception to this is Facebook is very much trying to figure out exactly who you are. If you have a Facebook ad network in your game, they literally will not display ads to a user that they can't link to a Facebook account. And then, they can track that across the whole internet and your Facebook account and whatever else. So, companies, lots of data, kind of creepy, but they pay us. Anyway, that's my bit on ads. Any other questions on that before I move on? All right.
Sorry, I have
Yep.
a question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, because you got quantity. You have lots of games.
Yep.
And you said that the games that have become well known, they've got a lot of downloads, and they get recommended in the game store.
Yep.
So why spread out all your effort? Like, if you have to advertise for these games, wouldn't it be easier to advertise for just a few games?
Sorry, I'm talking about putting ads in your game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But for when you're placing ads to get people into your games, and you've got a lot of games, is it a better strategy to go for like more games or just a few games and focus on those?
In terms of like putting ads in the games.
I think
Sorry.
it means that Noodlecake pays ads to advertise their games, right?
I'll get into that later. This was just
Yeah.
talking about the showing ads in your own game to make money.
Yeah.
Typically, yes, you do want to focus on like a game at a time and whatever. But I'll talk a little bit more about the user acquisition stuff a little bit later in the talk.
I wanted to ask about if you think it's a good strategy to just have like an adless version in your game that people just pay for that, like they download
Yeah.
the version and then they don't.
The next slide, I'm going to talk about a remove ads
Okay, perfect.
stuff.
Cool.
Yeah,
Awesome.
totally.
Sounds good.
Usually yes is the answer. Cool. Okay. We'll get to that in a second. So next up is in-app purchases, and everyone here probably hates them too. Maybe not as much as ads, but if you can't make money off of the purchase price of your game, then in-app purchases become a necessity if you want to run a business. In top performing mobile games, in-app purchases usually do make a lot more money than the ads as well. So something to keep in mind. Now, it is rare to get more than about 5% of your players buying in-app purchases, and 5% is like quite a good number. But keeping your game by keeping your game free, you reach a much bigger market, and so getting money from 5% of a big number is almost always going to work out better than getting money from 100% of a really small number, at least in the current mobile market. Depending on how your game is monetized, some of those players will also end up spending a lot more money than others, essentially paying for a bunch of the free players. I don't really love the term because I think it comes from gambling and whatever, but depending on your game's monetization model, you can end up having whales in your game that spend way more money than the average player. These top 2 to 5%-ish of players can often drive more than 50% of your game's revenue. So meaning, if you think about that, if 5% of your players are paying for anything at all, and then 5% of those players are your whales, then half of your revenue might be coming from only like 0.25% of your players. Anecdotally, in our game Golf Blitz, we have a team system in it. And each team allows you to have 50 people in it, and the teams compete on a leaderboard and all this kind of stuff. One of our players decided that they wanted to make a full team of 50 max level accounts so that he could have a team with just his accounts on our team leaderboards. In theory, you could do this all for free, but getting it to getting one max level account without paying takes the average player, like fairly dedicated player, around a year. So getting 50 accounts by not paying would take 50 years. So they just decided to spend a bunch of money, and they went ahead and spent, I believe, over $10,000
Wow.
in our game to accomplish their mission.
Huh.
And honestly, they seem happy to have done it. We've talked to them. Like, it seems crazy, but I guess some people just have a lot of money, and if they're having fun and they can afford it, then we're happy for the support. So, yeah. One other thing to mention, in multiplayer games, you also tend to need a decent player pool in order for the game to be fun. So by monetizing with in-app purchases instead of charging up front, you're actually going to help keep your multiplayer queues full and bring value to the people who are paying paying money in your game. If we didn't have players to play against and teams that were competing against this guy, he would have never wanted to spend a bunch of money in our game. This same idea is why free games like Fortnite have been able to do so well despite not charging for the game itself. They get people to play, it's free, you can tell your friend, just come download it, and then they spend money if they like the game. So in-app purchases, there are a bunch of different ways to use in-app purchases. Some greasier than others, and you really need to figure out which one is going to suit your game. So cosmetics are, in my opinion, one of the fairest ones for players. They just let you look cool or give you cool things to look at, really. I guess ways to show off against other players and stuff. But they don't really give the player any competitive advantage. They're just something cool to show off and express yourself. And they help support the game. On the perhaps less cool side are in-app purchases that help you progress through a game faster, including speeding up a reward or build timers, or they can give you power-ups or just otherwise help you be better at the game. In competitive games in particular, this can make the player base unhappy if they're too unfair. But as a lot of gamers tend to be competitive, they also do sometimes tend to be the ones that have the biggest chance to make huge money if you implement them well. These tend to best suit multiplayer games and live service games where there's new content being added regularly. And these can also tend to work really well because depending on how the game is designed, the same purchase can be consumable or keep giving more of an advantage the more times it's purchased, unlike a cosmetic, which once you have it in your inventory, you're not going to go buy the same skin again or something. In a similar vein, the stamina or lives, or generally like the pay to keep playing in-app purchases are another thing that have been successful in the market. These used to be really popular, but they have mostly fallen out in favor of other ones like giving you more power, because players just kind of hate them. And also, basically you're telling people, pay me to keep playing, and a lot of times they don't like that. The idea was that you'd get the player hooked on your game, and if they failed too many times, they would have to wait for their lives to regenerate or pay to keep playing. And they kind of sucked, but they did make a lot of money for certain games. And sometimes they were implemented very unethically in ways that would basically give you an impossible to pass level or something after you'd been doing really well. And then it's like, okay, well now if you pay, then it suddenly becomes easier and you can pass the level and you feel good and yeah. If you also have ads in your game though, then a remove ads purchase can be a great option for players and developers alike. I like this one. A one-time purchase of a few bucks is on average going to make more money than the amount of money a player would ever make you by watching ads. And then the players get the premium experience without any ads and can just enjoy the game. Having this option available in an ad sport game can also just bring you some goodwill from players. There's a lot of players out there who will say, I really love your game, but I wish there wasn't ads. And then when you have that purchase, they say, oh, well, I don't want to pay for it. But but it's at least there and they can stop complaining. And for games that were never really meant to have in-app purchases or interruptions for ads, or where it just will hurt the integrity of the game, a full game unlock does tend to be the way to go. This is essentially the one you use if your game is meant to be a premium game, like it would be on Steam or mobile. But you want people to actually go download it. The idea is that you let players play the first part of your game, so think of it a little bit like a demo. And then at some point, they will hit a paywall, and they need to pay to play the rest of the game. So we at Noodlecake have seen some good success with this model lately, especially where we've been porting a lot of PC and console games to mobile. Because they work because there often isn't a good place to interrupt gameplay for an ad, and ads can ruin the experience, or in-app purchases just don't make sense with the game. So this is a good approach. In particular, one game this worked well with for us is a game called Yes, Your Grace, which is a story-driven adventure kind of game. At some point, fairly early in the game, but far enough that the players got a taste of the game itself, there is a bit of a cliffhanger, and by putting the paywall there, the game has managed to do really well because people want to see what happens next. The one caveat of this approach is if you're doing this, you have to be very clear and explicit in your store listing, and ideally even when they open the game for the first time, that they're not going to get the whole game. You tell them you're trying this, it's essentially a demo, you'll have to pay to play the whole game, so that the expectation isn't that the whole thing is free. Because if you don't do that, then you will get review bombed, and you will have terrible reviews, and it's a bad time.
I played Yes, Your Grace on Steam. It's very good. But also, do you charge the same for buying it on Steam or unlocking the full game on mobile?
I believe that depends on the time. Typically, you want to have a little bit lower price targets on mobile. You get more conversions. It just tends to work out that way. That said, depending on the price of the game on Steam, a lot of times you can try to match the price, and you can do well, especially a lot of times you want to have a launch sale kind of, but then you'll just like Steam, but then you can have the game be full price at times. But yes, sales actually work really well on mobile as well, especially if you implement some sort of strike through pricing to show that it's on deal for this week, grab it now. That does tend to be pretty effective. But long story short, you will get more sales if it's a lower price on mobile, and that's typically the right advice. But there's more nuance to it. Sometimes you do try to keep parity with Steam. But I couldn't tell you exactly what we're doing on Yes, Your Grace. So yeah, and if you do want to just avoid all of these mobile monetization shenanigans, then trying to get your game into a subscription service is a great option. Some of these are more exclusive than others, and some will even help fund your game before release, meaning that you're going to be a lot less likely to lose money on it if it doesn't go well. But if you get in, then you can be sure to get some healthy revenue without needing to have ads or in-app purchases in your game. And in fact, I believe all of these, none of them will allow you to have ads in them. Because people are paying for the subscription to get a premium experience. Apple Arcade often provides some amount of upfront funding and then pays out developers from a pool of money based on how much their game is being played. And they also are very strong on privacy. So any games that are in Apple Arcade can't be collecting a ton of data, which is nice if you're getting kids to play them and that kind of stuff. Google Play Pass lives beside your paid or free game and gives subscribers the premium experience with their subscription instead of paying for it a la carte or paying for your remove ads removal kind of thing. And as a bonus, in our experience being in Play Pass, it doesn't usually significantly cannibalize your paid game sales, which you might think. People keep buying the game around the same amount, and you just get the extra revenue from Play Pass. Netflix and Amazon have their own models as well, and that depends on the game and the agreement, and they're pretty hard to get into, so I'm not going to go too far into that. Yeah,
Do you know anything about games on Discord?
I have not done anything with games on Discord. My impression was that they didn't really have a good way to make money off of them yet, but they exist. Yeah. Do you have any more info on them?
No, I guess all I know is Jordan Shidlowski, Winter Pixel.
Oh.
Put their games on Discord.
Right. Okay. So I think the thing about those two are they're usually web based. So while you play them, you can play them on mobile. I think they do need to be like web builds, typically.
Yeah, probably.
Which a lot of our stuff would not be easy to turn into. So anyway, yeah. So if you can get into one of these programs, I'd almost always say that it's worth it, and it will severely reduce the chance that your game is just an outright commercial failure. That said, the one thing to look out for is that since these services require some of these services require platform exclusivity. So if you're on Apple Arcade, for example, you cannot release your game on Google until your contract expires, and then you get your game back and you can do whatever you want with it. And the other thing is, since players need a subscription to play, you're really limiting the number of people who can play your game overall, and so you're almost always gonna come out ahead. But like technically, you're limiting the reach of your game. You're just not going to be able to get as many people to hear about it or download it. And with all that in mind, if you're not making a game that's really designed for mobile, then I would actually caution against launching it there simultaneously with Steam or console, which I believe is pretty much where everybody here is. As a publisher who regularly does PC to mobile ports, we've seen time and time again that your mobile launch will get way more attention if your game already has proven itself on other platforms. Whereas if you sim ship, it's a lot more likely to just get lost in the crowd. If you even just look at this year's Apple Design Awards, which winners and nominees, which were released like 2 weeks ago, I think, 10 out of the 16 game nominations launched on PC or console first. 3 of the games sim shipped, PC and mobile. 1 was Vision OS exclusive, so it doesn't even count. and only 2 of the 16 games were mobile first. And that's Apple's like most celebrated games. So yeah, if you're thinking about it's always a good idea to think about the potential of bringing your game to mobile down the line. But if you're already trying to get things ready for a launch on other platforms, it's maybe best to see if your game becomes a hit before you try to release it there. Despite that, if you think there's any chance, just what I'm saying, that you'll bring the game to mobile in the future, I do think it's worth considering how the game will work on mobile while you're designing it, as if you ever bring it to mobile, it's going to save you a ton of time and headaches in the future. And we will talk about that a little bit more later in the talk.
Yeah, I guess I just want to pause for a moment and
do the online people have any questions for us or for Ben?
All right,
I guess not. I have a few more questions. How much money do you get shown per ad to a player? And I guess it depends.
It depends on the player. It's low. It's like, I think usually under $0.01 for an ad show. That said, you know how I said if they go download the game, you get more money? That number can be big. So you can end up getting well over $1 if they go download the game. In fact, when Blizzard was first launching Hearthstone, if you had an ad that got someone to download Hearthstone, I think you could make around $10 a user.
Whoa, that's insane.
There was some like really insane money being thrown around at the time. So depending on the campaigns, depending on the market, depending on how good the game thinks it monetizes, I guess, and that they think they're going to be able to make their money back, the numbers can be pretty good if they go download the game. But usually the views themselves, they add up, but they're not very much.
Sure. Would you say that premium games in general, are they higher quality than free-to-play games, or are they uncorrelated to quality or budget, I guess?
I think that they're, I mean, so when we're talking free to play, if we're not talking like the Yes Your Grace model that I'm talking about now, I
Sure.
think of that basically
That's
as
basic premium.
a premium game.
Yeah.
Free to play games, I think they scratch different itches in a way, and they can be just as the quality ranges just as much as it can for premium games, is I guess what I'd say.
Sure.
There are ones that have a ton of thought into them, that are really smart, that are really, frankly, amazing games. And there are ones that are cash grabs that kind of suck. So I don't think, I think on average, if a premium game is on mobile, probably on average it's going to have a higher quality bar, because someone thinks that you should pay for it, compared to a lot of the hyper casual stuff that someone maybe made in a weekend. But the quality bar can vary pretty greatly.
Sure.
There. Yeah. Cool. Yeah.
I guess I'm guessing it's case by case basis entirely, but do you guys have a preferred way that you monetize? It's like just more profitable or just more successful?
So honestly, we don't think about the monetization model when we are signing a game. Honestly, we tend to look at, I mean, we'll be thinking about how it will be able to monetize, but we never try to adapt a game that much in order to like fit a model. It's really, we look at the game and we look at what would work with it, if that makes sense. So if it, can work really good for free to play already, the game systems are designed for it, then we're going to go for more IAP driven ads, whatever. If it's a story driven game that is like you play it once and done, and it's like you're not adding new content to it all the time, there's nowhere to put a good in-app purchase, we're not going to shoehorn that into a game because it just makes the game bad. So yeah, we try really hard not to try to pigeonhole a game into a monetization model that doesn't work with it. Yeah. Cool. Any more questions before I move on? All right. Then let's go back to talking about numbers. Analytics. So the big players in mobile are absolutely obsessed with analytics. Because free-to-play is such a numbers game, and mobile games are competing with all of the other addictive apps on your phone, like TikTok and Instagram, it's usually very important to collect data on how players are interacting with your game and figure out all the ways in which you can make your game better. That slide earlier where I showed that games from 2015 are still making a huge amount of money? A big part of that is because those games have relentlessly tested and tweaked their games based on analytic data and have way more years to refine their product than their competitors. So to get a basic picture of your game's health and potential in the market, you'll typically look at a few standard key performance metrics. Please excuse all of the acronyms, but they are super rampant in the analytics and mobile and user acquisition side of the industry, and you kind of just need to know them in order to read articles and stuff on it. So I'm gonna present them to you, but if you don't remember them all, you can go look them up later. That said, despite being pretty well researched on this stuff, I always end up in at least one meeting at GDC every year where I'm talking to some ad network or something and they just spew acronyms at me the whole time, and I'm blank-eyed trying to puzzle out what they're telling me. So yeah, don't feel bad if some of this doesn't stick. So depending on your monetization model, not all of these are as important or interesting, but typically these are some of the first stats you'll want to look at before diving deeper into analytics. And luckily, most analytics providers will give you these stats at least and more with very little integration. Basically, if you initialize their SDK, you're going to get a lot of these numbers. And in fact, Apple and Google storefronts will also give you some of this stuff without even implementing your own analytics. So retention is one of the biggest ones. It's basically just telling you what percentage of players come back to your game after playing it for the first time. D1 retention is what percentage of players come back 1 day or longer after they downloaded your game. D7 is 7 days or longer after they downloaded your game. Day 28 is 28 days. You get the picture. And you can get longer, but usually the biggest focus is kind of on the first 30-day window, or the 28 has been more popular now because it's 4 weeks. I don't know. It changes. Retention is a really important metric because the more people keep coming back, the more ads they'll be able to see in your game, the more likely they'll be to spend money in your game. And it basically is a measure of how sticky your game is and how long your game is able to keep people interested and engaged. Michael.
Is that opening the game, like, what if I download the game and then I open it once and then I wait 28 days and then open it once more? Is that 28 days of retention?
You will show up in the metrics, but the average person almost, if they open it on day 1, they're almost never going to open up on day 28. So it's kind of like noise in the data. Like, it doesn't really add to it, so you can basically ignore them.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, so then the average session length is just how long a player typically plays before closing the app. Knowing this gives you an idea of how well your game is keeping people engaged, and it can also give you some insight on how long of experiences you might want to design for if you're adding in the future. You might want to try to specifically make little things people can do in the amount of time that people are playing the game. LTV is the lifetime value of a player. This gets really important when you get into paid advertising in particular, and I will talk a little bit about that later. And it's just an estimate of how much the average player brings you in revenue. You try to include, it's really hard to measure this kind of stuff a lot of times, but you try to include both ad revenue and in-app purchase revenue in that metric. And DAU, or daily active users, is just how many people are actually playing your game every day, opening it every day. This is a good indicator of the health of your community, and it's particularly important with multiplayer games. There are plenty more stats and analytics, but I think these tend to be some of the most important, or at least they're the ones that I focus on the most. I'm not gonna provide some really solid benchmarks because they change a lot and it varies by genre and all this other stuff. But for a few quick ballparks, a top 10% of the market game should have a day 1 retention of around 40%, day 7 of around 12%, day 28 around 2.5%. So even the most high-performing titles don't usually convince more than half of their players to play the game for more than a day.
Could you repeat those numbers one more time?
Sure, yeah. D1 retention of around 40%, D7 of around 12%, and D28 of about 2.5%. And again, that's the top 10% of games.
Yeah.
If you get into the top 1%, it does go up, obviously. The average, though, is much lower than this. And the average is tricky because there's a lot of low effort stuff that gets put out there. But yeah, you should usually be aiming for those types of numbers.
That's interesting. Actually, still kind of, it's a bit similar actually to some Steam metrics of most users actually only play a game once.
Okay.
Actually, many don't even boot up the game they buy. And
I've
then
had
those
a
that
lot.
do only play one session, and that session can often be 30 minutes or less, and then that's it.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean the sessions are going to be smaller, but that does match. That does sound pretty similar. Yeah. So there you have it. Okay, what else should you measure? Well, KPIs, key performance indicators, can give you a good high-level indicator of your game's performance, and they might point you in the direction of ways that you can improve. They might give you some ideas on what can be better. They alone aren't really actionable. For that, you need to put a little more work in and add events to your game to record player interactions and identify when players are deciding to quit your game in particular. Funnels are a really good tool for this. Basically, you make a funnel by choosing a sequence of events, and then it will tell you in your analytics dashboard what percentage of players who trigger the first event also trigger the second event, and then what percentage of those will trigger the third event, and so on. And since hooking players and convincing them to come back is one of the hardest things to do, it is especially important to fire events in your FTUE, your first time user experience, acronyms, and in your tutorial. Your tutorial is super important to see if it's teaching the game well enough, or if early levels in your game might be too hard, and that kind of thing. You should have events at every major step in your tutorial and early game, and then you can make funnels using these events to see if a large percentage of players aren't making it to the end of your tutorial even, or if there's a particular step in the tutorial that is confusing players and causing them to leave. An anecdote, I'm currently doing a lot of this analytics with Super Flappy Golf, the game that we launched a while back, but that we've kind of just been adding content to. And I found some really startling things, like, over half of our players don't learn about the new mechanic in the game. That makes it fun compared to the old version. So now we're revamping our tutorial. And then I will do the same types of analytics, and I'll see, is our new tutorial better? And I'm really hoping it is. So this kind of stuff is really important, and can, because all of these metrics that I talked about earlier are really important, like your retention, you want to really focus in on that initial experience in particular to get people hooked. And then once you think you have identified a problem, you need to come up with a change and try to make your numbers better. The problem is, it is very, very difficult to say whether a change for sure is going to help your numbers until you test it out and real players are trying it. The solution is to use remote config and A/B testing. To do this, you start by setting up a remote config, which is essentially just some variables in your game, which you'll pull the values of from an analytics platform. Usually you'll set it up with your analytics platform so it's easier to measure. Technically, you could have this on a server somewhere, whatever. And then you'll change the behavior of your game based on the values you get back. So for example, in my game, I might have a tutorial variant remote config variable. And if my analytics platform says use tutorial variant 1, then I'll give the player that tutorial, number 1. And if my analytics platform says use tutorial variant number 2, I'll give them a different tutorial. You can then set up A/B tests in your analytics dashboard, telling it to send 50% of players A, 50% of players B. And then you can analyze the results of that data and see which one kept people playing and which one was working better for players. Once you've determined which tutorial won, the nice thing about remote config is you can then just tell the analytics platform, send all players this variant, and they will now get that better performing variant without you ever having to even update your game. And then you can move on to testing something else, and you repeat and repeat until you decide you don't want to work on the game anymore. So, general launch strategy real quick. Analytics can be an endless pit of minuscule improvements, so it can be hard to know how deeply to delve into them, especially if you're a smaller team without a ton of resources. A lot of times you'll make changes and you'll find that they don't really move the needle, or you spent a lot of time to move it by 0.5%, which can be kind of disheartening. That said, it's usually a good idea to do a little testing on the big picture items before you launch your game worldwide. It's common practice to soft launch your games to a limited number of players, and the dashboards give you ways to do this on Google Play, for example. You can say just give it to maximum 10,000 players or something. Or another common strategy is to just launch your game in a few select countries. So, for example, Supercell, when they launched Brawl Stars however many years ago, it was available in just Canada at first. And because Canada is kind of a similar market to the US, but it's less consequential if the game isn't doing well. And they can save their big launch marketing beat for the big market. It also, if your game isn't performing well or has bugs in it that you should have addressed that you didn't find, It gives you a chance to get the bad reviews out of the way and deal with them before you're hitting your whole big market. Because a lot of bad reviews and stuff can actually be really hard to recover from. Additionally, generally speaking, you want to focus more strongly on retention to prove that your game can hook people and keep them wanting to play before you go really hard on analyzing your monetization. Typically speaking, the more monetization systems you add to your game, the more likely people are likely to quit your game sooner, especially if you're putting more ads in the game. So, yeah.
Do you does Noodlecake gradually add monetization as time goes on, or is on those initial launches, do you even have monetization?
Very much depends on the game. I'll talk about Super Flappy Golf specifically right now because that's the game I'm working on. That game launched with monetization, kind of bad monetization, still has kind of bad monetization, frankly. But then yes, you add in monetization after. You always want to start with some monetization. Like you want to be able to make some money when you launch the game, but you don't want to go overboard right away. Is the takeaway? Because I have seen people who will see a talk that's about mobile game monetization, and they'll focus all their time on monetization systems and forget that they need to make a fun game to go with it, and then all those monetization systems are just hiding the fun from their game even more. So you really want to, before you spend a ton of time and effort into what is going to make money, you should make sure that your game has what it takes to make people want to play it, essentially. Yeah, and then last point on analytics, you have to make sure you are following privacy laws. In particular, for analytics, if you are showing ads in your game, or if you're showing ads in your game. I'm not going to dive into a ton of detail here because it can get messy and it's hard and it's depending on regions and all this stuff. But you need to pay extra special attention if your game looks child-friendly in particular. And you also have to make sure that you're sending child-directed flags to advertising networks, or just doing a blanket, don't collect any data from anybody in this game. Otherwise, you can get in a lot of trouble. For example, there was a company that we actually did an Android port of way, way long ago called, the game was called Happy Jump, company is called Retro Dreamer. When COPPA, Child Online Privacy Protection Act, got introduced in the US, they got fined, I think, around $100,000 because they were collecting too much data on children. So you gotta be careful with that stuff. And now GDPR is big in Europe. You gotta be careful there. There's extra ones in a bunch of different regions in the States. Our policy tends to be just we'll make our game work for the most strict of the laws and put that across the world instead of trying to micro-target all of these things and try to get more data or something out of other regions. But yeah, definitely something to keep an eye on. You're very unlikely to get fined if your game isn't successful, but if it becomes successful, make sure that you are doing the stuff for the privacy laws. Okay, we've made it to section 4. It has been already an hour and a half. This might be longer than I expected. Are we doing good? Do we want a quick break, or are we good to keep going?
Yeah, Ben, you haven't eaten anything. We can take a 5 to 10 minute break.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, then let's come back in at 7:30, and we'll keep going.
Sure thing. Yeah, there's lots of pizza, folks. Too much. Do you want any pizza, Ben?
I'll have some at the end of the talk. I feel
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, I just have a lot here.
Well, that's great. Thank you. It's been very informative. Lots of interesting stuff.
I'm glad.
Yeah, the retention metrics are very interesting. Yeah. Also interesting that the payment processors. I guess it'd be interesting if Steam also allowed different processors. That'd be interesting. I guess they view what? I guess these mobile Google Play and App Stores like kind of monopolies for their systems, so like I guess laws target them more.
I-
Whereas Steam is much more open, and they're not like there's other stores on Windows.
Yeah.
games.
I think that it also is, it's like Epic was a big part of
Sure.
pushing most of these laws forward, depending on the region, but it's almost always Epic that was involved in large part because they want their Epic store to be able to succeed better. But because the ecosystem, is more open on PC because it's not locked into your PC and you need to only use that store, they are having a much harder case getting Steam to have the same types of laws put against them. Although I believe they did open like lawsuits. Like I think it's been attempted, but they didn't put as many resources into it and yada yada yada. Yeah.
So I guess that's the payment processor is the only way for the companies to know how much revenue you're making. I guess the other way would be to have you self-report.
Which is a thing they've Unity was trying to do for a while, if you guys recall, the big
Yep.
stink there. There's ways, so there's a lot of data providers out there that can get pretty good estimates at your revenue. And so I think they would be able to tell if you're, 10 times off your thing. But yeah, if you were self-reporting, there'd always be the potential to not tell them, I guess, quite how much you're making and that kind of thing.
Well, there is a washroom that way if you need to.
Yeah, maybe I'll go real quick and.
Well, Mark, what's new with you?
Oh, not much. When you send that email, reminding about homework and also set up one-on-one, I did for the Thursday, 21st, I think.
Okay.
Because that was like the only option, but nothing happened.
Did you click? So you would get. I can show you what it looks like. The 21st.
Might not have.
Okay, so yeah, sure. It says So if you take a look here, so it says Mark Booth and Michael Long. What you do is you just click join with Google Meet, or you would have got an email and it would have like this URL here, and you click that, and then
Yeah, I didn't get the
Other
email.
than the bus here, oh my god, I put it at the wrong stop.
did
First time, and then I
is
was
this
waiting
your email
at the
address?
regular
Yes.
stops.
Well, then
that
maybe it went to
Google
your
told me
spam
to
or
go to,
something.
and somebody approached me like 10-15 minutes in a waiting, be like,
Yeah,
hey,
I was waiting
this
around
one
for
is
that.
shut down. Even though there's no indication, there's no signs anywhere. And so she's like, oh yeah, go over there.
First?
And so I went over there, and she's like, oh no, go across the street. I'm like, okay, and there's no way. I tried Googling, didn't even say that they moved the bus route anywhere. I tried like 4 sites.
Yeah, not even in junk.
On my phone.
I just didn't get the email.
Yeah.
That one I haven't used in 10 years.
It used to, yeah.
Okay, well, I guess if that happens again, you can message me directly on Discord.
Okay.
Okay.
And if like there is somebody with GPS, I think has to be on the bus that's like coming, you can kind of figure out like where it is
Yeah.
in relation to where you are right now, at your stop or whatever. So
Cool.
yeah, it's kind of handy.
I haven't tried this base of it because oh my god, the construction sites.
Also, you said that you'd be willing to help with Canada Media Fund grant.
That's right.
I think I have to take you up on that.
Okay, sure. Well, yeah, send me your application, and I'd be happy to take a look.
Okay.
Oh, is he gonna be joining you?
Well, yeah, I asked him to get money. Yeah.
Oh, you too?
This is my.
Of course, yeah.
This is the best week I have to do right so yeah.
Dude.
Yeah. So
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who took that?
Did you take it?
Yeah, I'm a really talented photographer, really, really talented guy. Yeah.
It's probably really attractive.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. That talk yesterday, although a lot of it was vague, was very helpful. It was like almost exactly what people talk about.
Okay, I think we're probably
In last,
All right.
ready to go.
The marketing one, yeah. It is definitely.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's keep trucking. I do think the back half here is gonna. Well, we're more than half through, but it's gonna probably be a little bit quicker, depending on questions. But if there's questions, heck yeah, that's great. So let's keep going. On to our second last section: marketing and discoverability. With over 500 games being launched on an average day, how do you stand out from the noise and get people to actually find out about your game? Basically, every slide in this section could be like a 2-hour presentation on its own, so this is going to be pretty surface level. But I hope to at least give you some insight about the big picture and give you some ideas of like what to start looking for if you want to do more research or just ask me more questions. So let's get into it. The first thing I'm going to talk about when it comes to marketing and discoverability is your store page. This is the most important part of your marketing because all of the other marketing channels lead to your store page. And if it doesn't convince people to download your game, then you just don't have a chance to show them why your game is fun. Because of how the storefronts surface games in search and lower level featuring, your app icon is by far your most important marketing asset. Kind of similar to your capsule art on Steam, if I'm not mistaken. This is the only visual that a majority of your potential players are going to see, but it's even more constrained than the Steam capsule art image. Your icon needs to be visually interesting, but focused enough to look both good, both big and when it's shrunk down pretty small. And honestly, while there is a bit of science behind what types of icons tend to do best, and it's just very, very difficult to judge at a gut level which icons are going to do best in the market without A/B testing them. So best practices are to start with at least 3 or 4 different icons, and then the storefronts all have tools to help you set up A/B tests on which ones players are gravitating towards most. Do note that your icon variations shouldn't be too terribly similar because you'll often find if you have a bunch of similar icons that they'll also perform really similarly. So you kind of want to have different enough icons. So let's do something fun. Let's play a little game.
Oh, there we go.
Here are 6 icons that we have tested from a game of ours that I've worked on a lot called Super Flappy Golf. And you play in that game. You play as a little bird, and that is also a golf ball, kind of. And you have to flap and try to get into the hole. And there's a few different modes to go with it. That doesn't really matter. What I would like you to do is make a gut decision on which one of these icons did best and which one did worst. And I'll give you all a moment to decide.
Okay, let's
A
see.
is best, D is worst.
I'm gonna go C did the best.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess A, yeah.
F?
Yeah, so that's good.
Okay, everybody locked in your answers?
B is the worst.
Okay, here are the results. And it was a bit of a trick question because, like I said, 2 similar icons, they tied. There's no statistical, at least with the number of players that we had looking at them, which it was a big number. There's 3 that all tied. And you can see they're all pretty similar. They're a yellow bird, doing things. I think there are different things that distinguish them that could be worse and better. The first one here, this one is more like the previous games in the series. It matches the first and second Flappy Golf a little closer, so maybe, players are coming that have played the previous games are more drawn to this one. This one, I think, is like visually one of the coolest, most striking ones. It's just like a very pretty one. And this one shows that there's golf at all.
Yeah.
These ones, you can kind of see that they're golf ball birds. But, this one's the one that actually really looks like you can see the hole and it's more clear.
Did you try an angry shouting guy?
You should see, I should go look up Golf Blitz. It's literally, it's the icon for our other golf game. Literally is a golf ball shouting. So that was made as a joke, and it turned out that it was by far our best performing icon. So those are genre specific a little bit. Like sometimes the angry shouting guy very popular, but does kind of tell you it's like going to be a competitive game or something. You know, there's certain ones where
Sure.
you don't want to have too big of a mismatch of what your game is and what your icon is showing. But yeah, and you know, then we have next up we got this guy here, a little bit derpy. He's really cute in our promo video, but if you haven't seen the trailer and seen how silly he is, his wing just looks weird. I don't know. This one here, too different, but also worth noting, didn't do that bad on Google Play. Actually was pretty good, but then when we tested it on iOS, did way worse. This one here, it's well polished, but people didn't get into it. Maybe it's too competitive. We're trying to make a friendly, fun game anyway, so it doesn't really fit the style of the game as well. But and in all of these, I would say maybe our yellow bird is a little bit too like the Angry Birds yellow bird. So right now we're actually running a contest in our Discord, getting people to submit their favorite birds that they have in our game, and we're gonna make one of those into our next icon to test.
Okay, cool.
So, you know, we're ready to try. We've tried this, we've tried this, we've tried this. They're all the same. We need to try something totally different now if we want to see if we can make the icon do better.
Is there anything where you do different designs in order to target different demographics?
You can do this a little bit. The store listings, you are able to set up custom store listings that will show to people if they like type in certain search terms and that kind of thing, or that are, you know, different countries and that kind of stuff. We certainly, whenever we would launch games in China, we would have, you know, usually a different icon. But it gets harder. But probably what we're going to end up doing here actually is, you know how I said this one looks the most like our old games? We're probably going to make that, we found that if people are searching for like Flappy Golf 2, if they already know our series, that one's the one they're most likely to click on. But most people don't know about our game, if you think worldwide. So it's not necessarily our best icon overall. So we're actually probably going to have a custom store listing that when people are searching for certain search terms that kind of imply they know what our series is, we're probably going to show them that one, and otherwise we're going to show them something else. So you can target a little bit. There's intricacies to it, but the storefronts both allow for some amount of that. Yeah. Great question. Okay. We'll move on to the other parts of the store listing. So your title is the next biggest lever, as it's always shown alongside your icon before people click in. So you want to choose your title wisely. And some people even will add a few extra descriptors to the end of their title if they have room. You have a very limited character count. But sometimes that can help you understand what kind of game it is, and it also makes your game show up a lot better in search results. So that's why you might see a game that says like whatever the name of the game, fun game, whatever, you know, it'll have some extra descriptor, strategy, multiplayer, whatever, you know, it'll have something like that. And the reason they do that is because it will show up a lot better in search results. And it gives the players a little bit more info about what kind of game it is before they actually decide to click on it and see the full store page. After that, you're into the meat and potatoes store listing itself. Assuming you have one, and you don't have to have one, the first thing people will typically see is your app preview, which is a video showcasing the game, and it's typically around 30 seconds. I think they have to be no longer than 30 seconds on iOS, but on Google, you can just point them to a random YouTube link, as far as I'm aware. That said, you have to remember that we're dealing with TikTok users scrolling through games. So you need to catch players' attention within the first 3 to 5 seconds. Otherwise, most will move on to another game. So you really need to make sure you start your trailer with a bang and get into the gameplay fast, because people are usually going to be, despite all the time you might have spent on your cool cinematic, they're going to be more interested in what your game actually is and how it plays than your marketing materials. Also remember that these videos are almost always autoplayed on mute, so your audio is unlikely to be a good hook. The next thing that most people will look at is your screenshots. And the first screenshot is the most important screenshot because that's the one that they're going to focus on first. Make sure your screenshots are interesting and good showcases of your game, and put the most cool ones or the ones that are most indicative of the play at the beginning, and then think about maybe some of your extra features or like side systems that aren't as visually interesting later on. If you want to show that you have a cool management part of your game or something, try to put that usually a little bit later, unless your whole game is about management, in which case show it up front and center, show people what they want to see and what it's going to be like to play your game. And then finally comes your App Store description. To be honest, not very many people will read this description. If they're reading it, more often than not, you've already convinced them to download your game. But that doesn't mean that you should half-ass it, because there is, it can be a deal breaker for some people. That said, particularly on Google Play, your store listing is your best lever for surfacing your game to players who are searching for general terms, because it indexes your store listing as search terms. So you want a bunch of good keywords describing your game in your listing, and you want to make sure you're listing the features it has and everything that people might be searching for that you want them to find your game from. On the other hand, on Apple, your store description is not indexed for search, but instead you have a really limited field for keywords that you can use to try and get into those search results. But because it's a really small and limited, you want to make sure you're doing some research and making sure you're putting in the most impactful keywords you can in there. And annoyingly, you want to avoid really long words in it, because that takes up a lot more of your tag real estate. But yeah, you can do some research, especially if you open up Apple search ads. You don't have to start a campaign, but if you go through the process of maybe starting a campaign, it will help you see what keywords do well. It'll give you a little 1 to 5 scale of how much stuff is searched for, and maybe it'll recommend ones for your game.
It's interesting that this is exactly the same advice I give for the Steam store pages of the video. They may play it on mute. It's got to have gameplay right away, and it shouldn't be too long.
Yeah.
That first screenshot or capsular, it's all that.
Totally. I think there is a lot actually of crossover of best practices. I'm always surprised when I see games that start with a big long logo or something.
Yep.
And some companies, if you're big enough, you can get away with it. If people have been waiting for that game for ages, then you have the luxury of that. But if no one knows who you are, you have to show them your game right away.
That's right.
So yeah, make sure that you're showing off what it is, because a lot of times, like I said, 3 to 5 seconds. After that, they're gone. Okay, paid user acquisition. UA is the term that you will hear over and over, and that just means user acquisition. And it's a huge element of the mobile games ecosystem. It is, at its core, just paid advertising trying to get users to download your game. The most common form of this is just to pay some companies that you might even be running ads in your games to make money with. You're paying those ad providers to show off your game instead. And that will get your game visibility in other people's games and hopefully sway them to come and try yours. Advertising on social media channels is also pretty common and growing, I would say. So putting stuff in TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, they can be good places to advertise. And buying search ads in particular on the App Store on Apple tends to be a common tactic to get more users, so that your game surfaces as one of the top results when they search for maybe one of the more generic terms that could be associated with your game in particular. But sometimes you'll even see it on competitors' games. I bet if you type Golf Blitz in, you will see a different game show up first than our game, because someone is paying to be there. Kind of like Google Ads, really. Some quick advice for if you're making ads, they are typically either videos or if you have a little bit more time and want to make it a little bit more fun, playable ads. And in them, you want to get to the action right away and show players your hook, plus the flashiest stuff you can really quickly. Much like with your app icon, though, it's incredibly hard to know what's going to resonate best with players. So ideally, you actually want to make a bunch of these different ads and different variations, and then you let the data decide which ones are working best. For reference, several ad providers that I talked to at GDC this year told me they recommend having around 20 different creatives to get started. But note that these can be pretty similar variations on the same thing. In particular, I saw a really good talk at Unite last year that was showing playable ads. And it was impossible to, they had basically my icon gimmick there, where you'd guess which one, and it was impossible to predict which one was going to win. But you'd have one that would be like really easy for the player to beat, and you'd think, okay, well, you want people to feel good, so they'll go play your game. And then you'd have one that is really hard, basically impossible to beat. And you'd have some other variation in there, and it was never the same. You play basically the same idea across 3 different games, and it was always different. And you just never know. So you just need to try a bunch of different stuff and see what sticks. Yeah, the other thing about playable ads, they're kind of interesting. You now can make them with Unity. It's a little bit tricky. There are other frameworks out there, but they have to actually be web builds, and they typically have to fit under 5 megabytes, including your audio, which will often end up being the biggest part of it, actually. So they can be tricky to build, but they are more engaging, more fun. Players tend to convert a lot better if you have a playable ad, but it takes more resources to build them. One thing that I would say is a fair bit different than PC marketing is that influencer campaigns rarely make a good return on investment. In part because there just isn't that many users who do mobile game content, and there's a lot of people who don't follow it. People just don't seem to want to follow it as much. It's harder to produce, requiring special capture cards and setups, and since a lot of mobile games tend to be designed for short sessions, it's also really kind of rare to see people streaming them for hours on end on Twitch. That doesn't mean that it isn't a possibly good form of marketing, and I do think it's growing quite a bit in popularity, especially if you get influencers on TikTok that are already doing just a short snippet, right? But it just doesn't tend to be near as big of a factor in the current mobile market as it is for Steam and console. So with that in mind, paid UA is again pretty analytics heavy. There's a lot of analytics in mobile. While there are times that you may want to optimize your advertising campaigns for different goals, usually the thing people are concentrating on is how do you make money? And so at a high level, this is how it's done. Again, sorry for all of the acronyms. It just comes with the territory. First up, people want to calculate their CPI, or cost per install. This number will fluctuate based on basically unlimited number of factors, with the most prominent one usually being how good your ads themselves are. But that also can be how drawn to your game people are, how good it looks in general. And it honestly can be hugely reliant on timing and luck, too, frankly. The same exact campaign with the same exact ads might work amazingly one month and do basically nothing the next. And it can have, a lot to do with trends, seasons, politics, everything else in the world that influence people. And also, if you run the same campaign for a long time, people just might have seen your ad a bunch of times. And if they weren't convinced before, seeing it again isn't really going to convince them. But okay, you ran a campaign for X dollars and then gotten Y number of installs, which allows you to calculate your cost per install. Then you need to calculate and compare that to your LTV, which I kind of talked about before, your lifetime value. This number is also very nebulous, and it will change based on the type of users you're acquiring, the economic climate, and unlimited other things. But hopefully you are able to get a rough idea of what it is, And usually you'll actually want to separate out people in your analytics that you have acquired from a specific campaign to learn how much on average the users that actually clicked on those ads made instead of your overall player base. Because you might be getting way more downloads from a certain ad, but maybe none of those players actually want to spend on your game. Once you have those two numbers, then you can calculate your ROAS, return on ad spend. This one's pretty simple. It's lifetime value minus the cost per install, and that gives you an estimate on how much money your ads earned or lost you. If you come out on top, amazing. But a few things to remember. It sometimes takes some experimentation and failure to get your first positive return on ad spend. And also, advertisers will usually surface your ads to the people they think are most likely to be interested in your game first. So just because you're getting a good return with your first very small campaign doesn't mean that you can just like bunch up your budget and turn on the money hose. You have to keep increasing your campaign spend slowly and measuring it bit by bit and monitoring to make sure you're still making money, because if you just say, oh, it made money, let's put a ton of money in it, you're going to start getting users that are a bit less interested in your game and that might not return as well. Okay, now let's talk about storefront recommendation algorithms. Both Apple and Google have sophisticated and secret algorithms that recommend games to users and give them a personalized app store. If you can get into the good graces of these algorithms, then your game can get lots and lots of downloads without spending a dime, which is really the ideal situation to be in. Unfortunately, it can be a little bit of a chicken and egg problem. Your game needs to perform well to get recommended, but you need a bunch of users to perform well. Sometimes, as a result, a small-scale paid advertising campaign can actually help kick these systems into gear, and so your spend actually gets you also users from another side that you can kind of try to calculate into your analysis to see if the organic installs, you call it organic if you didn't pay for them, your organic installs are also increasing thanks to your advertising campaign. But regardless of if you're doing paid marketing or not, it's really important to pay attention to a few different things in order to have the best chance of getting into the algorithm's favor. To be frank, while the algorithms are secret, it seems like the biggest single metric that will get your game more money is how much money your game is making. And specifically, how much money your game is making the storefronts, Apple and Google. It should be noted that just because your game is making ad money doesn't mean that Apple and Google are making money. They are not. They are not making money from your ads. So if your game is free and you're not getting any in-app purchases, even if your game is making a ton of money, the storefronts won't care because they're not taking a cut. They're not getting any money. But they are taking a cut on any paid games and in-app purchases. The more money flowing through your game, the more users the algorithms will recommend it to, which brings in more money and then more users. And the cycle repeats until the new users being recommended aren't spending as much money in your game. Like I said, kind of like with advertising, eventually you'll start being recommended to players that aren't as interested, and you'll kind of cap out, but it'll keep recommending your game to people it thinks will make them money, basically. That said, there are some other very important metrics that are taken into account by the storefronts other than money. For one, if when people see your app icon and game page, they almost never download the game, then the storefronts aren't going to want to waste their precious eyeballs on getting people into your game. So you need to make sure that your store page, like we just talked about, is really good and that your icon is making people want to click on it. They also want to give people games they like. So having a positive review score is essential. If your game has less than a 4-star rating, you're going to have a really tough time. And in the past, Google has straight up told us, at least when it was a little bit more editorial, if you have below a 4-star rating, you will get removed from a lot of their featuring. So make sure it's very, very important in mobile to have an in-game prompt for users to go rate your game. I don't know, is that even allowed on Steam?
To have to pay your users to.
To tell your users in the game, go rate it.
I don't know.
I don't think
it's certainly that practice isn't nearly as prevalent.
I think it.
Okay, they ever even seen a prompt?
I think it's actually against
It might
TOS.
be against it.
I think it's against TOS. But on Apple and Google, it's very much embraced. They have their own things that will pop up a prompt in game and let them rate the game without even going to the store. So you want to make sure that that is in your game.
Is that also like they ask, did you like the game? And then they
So-
only show you the rating if you say yes. or
That's
something.
exactly why. Yes, they say they do that because, okay, so this is the other part. Those in-game review prompts that you can trigger from Apple and Google that let them review straight from the app, they are rate limited. So if you show that to someone and they just click cancel or they don't give your game a review, it will not show to them. You can call it as much as you want in your game, but it won't actually show up until like 6 months later. Like it's a long window. They changed that window. I don't know. It can change, I think. But like that's why they do the are you enjoying the game, and then they do the other one, because once they've shot their shot, if you just cancel or you give them a bad review, they don't get to ask you again for a long time. Yeah.
So the store algorithms, they mostly rely on how much money they're making, Google or Apple. Would this also be a reason not to use a third-party payment processor?
That's a good observation, and probably. That said, maybe I talk about this a little bit more later. It's really hard to get recommended on the stores now. So the upside might still be better to use a payment processor, knowing that you're probably not going to get as much featuring in the Apple and Google storefronts. I think I talk a little bit more about that later. We'll see. But that's the short answer. One other thing to think about here, on Google in particular, they closely monitor your crash and ANR, or app not responsive rate. And in fact, right in their dashboard, they have a chart that they will show you showing your bad behavior threshold over time. It has a bad behavior threshold saying, like, if you're over this, you're doing a bad job. So you want to make sure that your app number of crashes and app not responsive essentially freezes, stays below that bad behavior threshold. Otherwise, you will get penalized in these algorithms. Yeah, because if your game is crashing or freezing too much, they aren't going to want to recommend your game to new players. It's a bad experience. And interestingly, the bad behavior threshold does fluctuate. They change it based on metrics from other games. So if suddenly there's like one ad network that has a bug that crashes a bajillion games, that's taken into account, because all the other games, it'll bring up the bad behavior threshold, because they'll know across the market that this has affected a lot of games. Yeah. And since Noodlecake is a video game publisher, I would also be remiss not to at least mention publishers. A mobile game publisher can help your game get more visibility by using their reputation, their business connections, their industry knowledge, and their money to help your game. Depending on what services the publisher offers, they may also be able to provide technical help or even port your game to mobile, which is something we do regularly. And their business connections sometimes are able to get you into programs that you wouldn't have had access to yourself, like Apple Arcade or Google Play Pass. We have a bunch of games in there. I think it would be very hard to get in if you were, in particular, a first-time developer that doesn't already have a huge success on Steam or console. That said, the mobile publishing industry is also full of companies that are frankly looking to take advantage of people. I want to be clear that Noodlecake is not one of those companies, but there are a lot of companies out there who are. So make sure you get a lawyer to read any contracts that you're thinking about signing, and don't get pressured into signing something if you're not comfortable with the terms of the contract or the people that you're talking with. In particular, pay attention to things like if they will own your IP after. And a lot of times too, nowadays, they have started a lot of publishers will make you test your game and look at all those KPIs I talked about earlier. So they'll pay for, you know, a small scale marketing campaign. Small scale in their books is probably going to be like 10 grand, so like still money. They'll kind of temporarily sign. They'll have right of first refusal on your game essentially. And if after they market the game it hits the numbers they want, then they'll sign your game. But yeah, just be cautious if you're thinking about going with a mobile publisher other than Noodlecake.
Then don't bring in lawyers, right?
Uh,
Just trust? Yeah.
Trust is fine. Feel free to bring in lawyers. We're not hiding anything.
I guess, of course, you could do an entire separate talk on publishing, but I guess for you folks, how often do you, for the games you publish, how often do they apply to you, or do you reach out to them?
That number is changing. We are starting to reach out to people more than we used to, especially on the PC and console front. But it still is overwhelmingly people coming to us. That said, a lot of times too, it's not the cold calls in our emails, although there is a lot of that, and we do sign games from that. Conferences tend to be a really valuable part there. The general quality bar at conferences is just better, right? So if people have paid to come to a conference, they are probably more invested and think their game has what it takes, I guess. So you tend to get higher quality pitches when you're at conferences and you're meeting people. And we also, because we have a pretty good reputation and we have, you know, had good experiences with a lot of prominent indie developers, we get recommended to people a lot. So a lot of times things just kind of come in through the grapevine where they say, hey, you know, Bennett Foddy said you're really good. Go work with them. You know, like that kind of stuff happens, which is really nice. It's really nice. But yeah, more people coming to us, but we're starting to do more outreach than we used to, for sure. All right. Whew. We've gone through a lot, but we've made it to our final section, player behavior and best practices. Basically, you need to know your market in order to be successful on mobile. And there are a few important things to keep in mind when designing your games if you want a better chance of success. And honestly, a lot of these tips can help on any platform. Kind of what we were talking about before, a lot of this stuff can be great on Steam and PC and console as well. So to set the stage, let's talk briefly about how mobile gamers tend to play mobile games. The reality is that unlike someone sitting down at a computer or console, most mobile players are playing games in short spurts rather than as dedicated time to game. That does change for your more dedicated players once they find the fun in their game. A lot of times they'll be sitting on the couch and playing for a long time. But it's very common for people to be playing on bathroom breaks, during school recess, in waiting rooms, on public transit, whatever. And especially if they're their first time playing, a lot of times it's going to be a short experience. A different part, while sound can be an important part of mobile games, which I can directly attest to, as there's a lot of players that absolutely adore the soundtracks of some of our games. Typically, a half or more of your players are going to be playing with the sound off. So having any sort of audio cues that are important in gameplay is probably going to be a problem. And that doesn't mean you shouldn't put time into audio. There's still a lot of people who are going to listen, and it makes the game better. But don't be offended that a lot of your players are not going to hear the audio in your game. And then frankly, you are competing with all of the other distractions on that person's phone. You need to keep people's attention, but also respect that they might need to pause at any moment to answer a text message or phone call. As we touched on earlier, the market is spread all around the world, so it's good to keep in mind that players who speak other languages may want to play your game and try to accommodate for that. And it should also be noted that, especially on Android, where there is roughly a bazillion different, very dumb aspect ratios and resolutions, and there's such a wide range of processing power. Things can vary wildly, which can make designing things a little tricky, but you want to try to make sure that things can work on a very wide variety of devices. So we'll go a little bit into more depth about some of the specific things I'd recommend doing. I have a full other presentation on this, but we've talked long enough. I don't need to do the whole thing. So I'll give you some of the big ones. So first off, with that in mind, one of the best things you can do to help your game succeed on mobile is to design for short gameplay sessions. If your game can make a player feel like they've accomplished something in like 2 minutes, then they are way more likely to keep coming back and chipping away at your game, even if that 2 minutes is just spent opening a reward or contributing to a team goal without even getting into the core game itself. Additionally, while this doesn't always work with things like real-time multiplayer games, you should try your best to allow your game to be paused and resumed gracefully at any time. Nothing sucks more than to have to answer your phone call and come back to your game to see that you've lost progress. Now, of course, apps will tend to stay alive in the background for a time, but once the player leaves the app, the OS could kill it at any time, and especially on low memory devices, it'll just kill your app, and if you didn't save things, then the player's out of luck. So do your best to do your own due diligence and make sure player progress is saved whenever possible. And you can get, for example, triggers that you can hook into for when your app gets backgrounded. So that's a good time to actually save some progress and do a little cleanup so that the user isn't going to lose progress. Another important design consideration when it comes to mobile is your UI. Since there are so many different device sizes and aspect ratios, you can't just hard code your UI to fit a specific few screen sizes. It needs to be able to adapt to all sorts of, again, dumb resolutions. One of the guys at our office has one that it's a square. It's just literally a square. And it has like a BlackBerry keyboard on the bottom or something. But our games kind of work on it. Kind of. So anyway, you want to make sure to design for as many different device sizes and aspect ratios as you can. Additionally, and this in particular tends to be a problem when we're porting PC games to mobile, if your buttons and text are too small, then they can be hard to see and hard to interact with in particular on mobile devices. So being able to scale the UI and move things around on the screen to avoid camera notches and rounded corners is a huge plus. Right? If on iPhone you have your UI right in the corner here, things might get just blocked by the camera and different things. So you have to be able to make sure that it can be shifted around and moved so that they can see everything on your game. Additionally, since the market is so multinational, it's a great idea to use iconography and pictographs to get your message across whenever it can make sense, so that hopefully you can convey how the game works to players who might not speak any of the languages that your game supports. It's a good idea to support a bunch of languages, but it's still a good idea, when possible, to use pictures. You certainly can go overboard with this, and there are times when words are necessary. I've definitely seen games where they try to do this and it's not clear what to do, and it's like, you should have just told me what to do. But if you can get things across without using a lot of words, then it can be a huge win. And also, a lot of mobile players won't read your tutorial anyway, so if you have pictures, they're more likely to get it. I will note too that you should always try to use standard icons when people don't don't get too fancy. For example, the icons in the back of this slide, don't try to use a gear for settings, use home for home, use play. Don't try to design them too much, because if you try to make them look too unique in your game, people just won't know what they mean. So although it feels less creative, you want to stick with what is obvious to people. Oop. Okay. And what I believe is honestly great advice for any game, get to the fun fast. On PC and console, where players have typically paid a little bit of money to try your game, they're going to give your game at least a bit of time before they bail, because they want to get their money's worth, usually, if they open your game at all. But on mobile, where they can go download another free game immediately, you need to prove to players very quickly that your game is worth their time. Try not to start your game with tutorials explaining menu systems or story exposition, and instead focus on getting players playing the game as soon as possible. Ideally, you get them into gameplay right away, and in your tutorial, you teach them how to play as they go, so that they can have a chance to experiment and play right off the bat rather than being told exactly what to do and explain all of your game systems all at once, which can just be information overload and scare people away. And whenever possible, find ways to add mechanics as the gameplay progresses rather than just dumping your big complex game instructions on them all at once. And if your game does have a story, I would recommend starting by hinting at the story and getting more into your big story beats and gameplay interruptions once you think the players are already invested in your game and will want to learn more. By following this approach, you're going to be a lot more likely to have people sticking around and coming back for more. We did it, everybody. It's been a lot.
Yeah.
But we're at the TLDR. And luckily, I have fun effects too. So, all right, we made it to the end. It's been a lot to take in. I hope it's been interesting and you've learned some valuable stuff. But if you've been glazing over for the last hour, here are my biggest takeaways. 1, the mobile game market is bigger than PC and console combined. 2, make games free to download and monetize once players see the value. 3, use analytics to determine pain points and improve your game. 4, spend time making a good store listing and consider marketing opportunities. And number 5, get to the fun fast and allow for short gameplay sessions. And that's all I got. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. Awesome. Is there any questions, I guess, from the online people first?
I don't have any questions. Thank you. That was very thorough and interesting.
All right, right
Happy
on.
to hear it.
Okay, what about the in-person people? Any more questions for them?
Could you go back one slide, just to like not the GIF of Rainbow, but yeah, the TLDR. Just want to see all the major points again. Yeah, beautiful effects, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was fun because I put them earlier in the thing and then I copied the slide and they were just in here. I was like, oh, beautiful.
Awesome. I just wanted to copy that last time.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Awesome. Cool.
So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions about this presentation. I've also been in the game industry for a very long time. I'm happy to answer questions about, I don't know, video game industry stuff, going to conferences, whatever, publishing. If anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer. But otherwise, I do have a little activity for people to do as well.
Cool. Quick question: are you going to GCC coming up, or?
I'm not personally going, but someone from Noodlecake is. Chase is going to.
Yeah, I know Chase.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, this year it was just GDC. I bet I'll end up at another one or two later in the year, but as someone who's also developing games, if you go to conferences all the time, it really hurts the development cycle sometimes. Yeah.
True.
Okay, right on. Sure, we'd love to hear your exercise.
Okay. So thanks everybody. Activity. So what you're gonna do is think about how you would, I think everybody's working on a game, how you would port your game to mobile. You can get into more detail than just these 3 points that I'm gonna bring up right here, if you'd like, but in particular, I would like you to think about these 3 things. So, what changes would you make to your game to make it suit mobile better? In particular, think about if you would change any of the systems to make it better for short gameplay sessions, maybe changes you would make to your tutorial to get to the fun sooner, if you need to change your UI to make it work on mobile, or if your controls would need to be adapted to work on a touchscreen, really anything that you can think of that would need to be changed or that would be beneficial to change to make your game work better on mobile. Number 2, What parts of the game would you show in the first 3 to 5 seconds of your marketing materials? Hopefully you've already thought about this then if you've been doing Steam stuff. But what would you show in order to convince players to download your game? And think about the flashiest moments you can, the hooks that will keep players coming back, and what makes your game unique. And bonus points if I can actually see a little bit of footage. But I don't know how much time we'll have. Another good thing to think about here, if you have it, is like what kind of playable ad might you make? Number 3, how would you monetize your game? Assuming for the purpose of this, we're gonna assume that you can't get into a subscription service and that you're not just gonna put it out as a paid game. So, where would you put your paywall, or would you put ads or in-app purchases into your game? If you have a full game unlock, when would you present that to the user? Is it at a specific point in your progression, or maybe even you just lock out certain features until they pay for the whole game? Think about that, and then if there's time, I guess we'll try to do a short discussion of everybody's stuff.
Okay, right on.
Sound good?
All right, I posted his notes in the text as well. So we'll give, I guess, 15 or 20 minutes, and then we'll see how we're doing, and then we'll discuss them at the end. Yeah.
Sounds great. Yeah.
All right, I'll set a timer.
Good luck, everybody.
Oh, that was a very good presentation. Thank you, Ben. Really good.
Thanks.
You're welcome to have as much pizza. Take home a whole box. That's your
I'm
part of
gonna
your
start-
reward. You'll
I'm gonna
be
start
paid
with
more
that.
than just pizza.
All right, perfect.
Pizza party.
I'll start with a couple pieces.
I'll take back my clicker though.
Yeah.
If you want, you could write in Google Docs, and then you could share that, or share your screen at the end. We'll have like people spend 5 minutes or 3 minutes, or you could just say it out loud. I don't care. Whatever suits you. So if you'd like, Ben, you could pause or stop the recording completely. I don't know if we need to go over people's individual stuff for people in future. Don't need to hear about these games.
Okay, bye, potential future watchers. See ya.